Okay, thank you.
Thank you, and Igor.
Hello, everyone. Russian after Russian. Russians are coming. Okay, Yuri just talked about stress relief, and I'm not a mouse, apparently, but I'm stressed, and I decided to take 20 drops of the stuff he was talking about. But I have an advantage to compare with the mice. I do have placebo effect. So if I'm okay, then it works. Double-folded. Okay, I'm going to cover a lot of bases, more than 4, so at least 5. So I will be jumping from a subject to subject, but I'm going to combine them all together and connect in the end. So don't be surprised. So we begin with the Schumann resonance. Schumann resonance, as you know, it's a phenomenon of the standing waves existing in the relatively narrow gap between the surface of the Earth and the ionosphere. Due to the active lighting activity, we have a permanent, it's about like 50 strikes a second. We have a permanent source of electromagnetic waves going inside this gap until they got absorbed. But some portion of this electromagnetic wave, they find a way through the whole gap and create a set of standing waves. The diagram you see to the right, this diagram was experimentally recorded in Antarctica, where the level of electromagnetic pollution is low. And it's about like 8, 14, 20, 26, 32, and so on hertz, according to the formula, which gives you a rough example of these frequencies. But are they stable? They are not. So every peak at a particular mode frequency in the harmonics, they vary about 1-2 hertz both up and down. And that's the live monitoring of the frequencies of the Schumann resonance in Tomsk, Siberia. They do it online. You can check it yourself, and you see how they go up and down. That's the first 4 harmonics. Why is it happening? If you look at the graph to the left, you see that the level of ionosphere is moving closer to the Earth or further from the Earth, which create the gap is like breathing space which translates the Schumann resonance frequency back to the Earth. It's like a space weather. So let's jump from the subject of the Schumann resonance to the brainwaves. Because when Otto Schumann first theoretically predicted the existence of Schumann resonance, it was 1950s. About the same time, neurophysicists started to explore brain, electrical activity of the brain. You see that placement of the electrode on the scalp of a person, and to the left at a standard internationally accepted placement of the electrode. And then when they recorded all these electrical signals, probably you all know about that, according to the order how they were discovered, alpha, beta, gamma, and delta, Greek alphabet, they found the different frequencies of this electrical rhythm responsible for different functions of the brain, from alpha when we're waking up, to beta when we're thinking, up to the gamma meditative state or state of the brain where all these lower frequencies functions combined together. But if we place these 2 graphs together and you see all these frequencies, you see it's not a coincidence. It just may be an indication that our brain, using these Schumann frequencies, like a staircase, step by step, moving our consciousness from a sleeping state of alpha and delta rhythm to higher active gamma rhythm. So if it's beneficial, then you can read a book of Wolfgang Ludwig. Sprechen Sie Deutsch? Nein? So if you don't speak German, don't expect to find this book on any other language. So in this book, published in 1999, Dr. Ludwig indicated the benefits of the Schumann resonance and also mentioned that, you see, astronauts at the space station, first they were not feeling good because they were deprived by the Schumann resonance frequencies. And then we don't know how NASA created this Schumann resonance surrounding for the astronauts, but their well-being improved. Okay, so what's going on there up there? So that's measurements made by the Russian satellite Chibis, exploring the Schumann resonance frequencies all over the globe. And that particular graph was taken over the Japan, if you see to the left. There's all these power lines. And to the right, you see frequencies, including Schumann resonance frequencies, which are not noticeable. But what is noticeable? Power lines, 60 hertz and 50 hertz lines. Japan is a lucky country. They use two standards, like European 50 hertz and American 60 hertz. And two peaks, the most distinctive peaks. So it looks that all industrial activity, all this electromagnetic fields, they mask Schumann resonance frequencies, which we now know are beneficial for us. We're surrounded by all these electrical appliances going back to Earth. Are they harmful? You know, we know in our lab that they are, but a lot of discussion about maybe they are not. I'm just going to present you one graph. It was published about 20 years ago by the professor Neil Cherry from New Zealand, and he collected data about childhood cancer around Sutter Tower in San Francisco. From the 1973 to 1988, all cases were combined together for children younger than 21 years old, and then they put all this data on a graph where you see to the left the number of cases, it was right, you see the distance from the tower. The closer you are to the tower, the more cases of cancer. You can make conclusions yourself. So in our lab, we're working with Yuri for 35 years, but I moved to Oregon 5 years ago. And we started on working on these devices probably 6-7 years ago. Is it possible to do something to counteract this potentially harmful effect? And the device, which is we called EMF Transformer, that's to the right, you see, was created. Actually, it's no more than a piece of plastic, polyurethane, if to go to more specifics. But it was irradiated, we call it infused, in the chamber, which Yuri just talked about. And they were placed on the phones, on the computers, anywhere we think of a possible electromagnetic radiation. First samples of this device were sent to Arizona, to Dr. Fannin. He's a specialist in quantitative EEG for his evaluation. He used the pilot study on 5 men, 5 women of different ages, normal health, and then that diagram was created. That's a normal state of our brain according to EEG. Green is good. If it goes to red, it says about hyperactivity. If it goes to deep blue, it's a suppressed brain. So then a telephone was placed, you see on the picture to the left. And then you see hyperactive frontal lobe electrode placement. My mother told me never show on yourself, but okay, I can do an exception. And to the right, you see the picture when this sticker, this plastic, was placed on a phone. And the brain goes to normal activity. The same picture is going to the left hemisphere and left is our logical hemisphere for people who right hand, and so then it affects your logical thinking and verbal expression. Or to the right is emotional state, so not good in both cases. What is a possible explanation beside the fact that Yuri described you? He is using gas discharge plasma. It's low pressure plasma which is activated by electrical signals going through the plasma. What we have there in the ionosphere, we have the same story. Low pressure gas plasma shaking by Schumann resonance frequencies. Why not to recreate it in the lab? So what we did, we used the set of the frequencies which you saw before with a discrepancy sweeping back and forth, and we infused it back. And so it works. But why it works so successfully? Then we looked to the experiment made in recent years. Dr. Persinger in Canada, he's dead now, unfortunately, made an experiment. So EEG placed on a scalp of two persons, one in one lab, in a remote lab, another lab. What is common for these two persons, left one and right one, they both in a subtle magnetic field of the same pattern controlled by a computer. And then in the left lab, somebody flashes a light to the eyes of a person. Not a pleasant experience, but what to do? In the right lab, no flashlight is used, but EEG records like somebody flashes to the flashlight into the eyes of the person. Interesting, right? Like a similar magnetic field surrounding creates an entanglement. Okay, then we found the work of two people that made an experiment between Louisiana and France. And so they used two chips. They were irradiated by break-in radiation in the medical accelerator. These two chips, then one of the chips was sent from France to Baton Rouge, to Louisiana. And this chip, they were thermoluminescent sensors used in many experiments. In many experiments when you need to measure influence of the temperature. And then in France, you see 220 volts, it's France. They changed the temperature, and the slave device was, with a photomultiplier, was looking for the changes in temperature. And they did the same experiment between Louisiana and Baton Rouge. And they found that the very moment something is happening in one place, photomultiplier fixes the same change. Again, we have entanglement. Then we decided, why not to check this in our lab? For 4 years, we worked with Dr. Mark Metus in Canada. He is a chiropractor, and he is using muscle testing for 40 years. So he is a great expert, and you can write about his book. In his book written about many techniques, he created quantum alignment technique. And we just irradiated 2 samples of EMF Transformer, which I talked about. We sent one to Canada, to Toronto. He works in Toronto. And he checked in on a patient. A patient to the left picture shows a normal locked position of a muscle when the person is normal. And all chiropractors know that if you place a magnet here on a CV meridian, which goes from lower jaw down there, then a muscle goes weak. Every chiropractor knows that. But what they don't know, that when he removed this magnet there in Toronto, and I placed the magnet in my lab in Oregon, the patient went weak. So like the effect of the magnet was transitioned to the person. Again, we're talking about entanglement, which gives us a possibility to give a device to people who are hyper-electromagnetic sensitive. And you know that now with 5G coming into now our neighborhood, we're having more and more cases with people who cannot tolerate any electromagnetic signal. They won't be able to sit here because any of you having cell phone, they live literally in a Faraday cage. And when we give these devices, we also irradiate their clothing. They are able to pursue normal life. That particular person, our friend, a businessman, he was not able to use his phone because his ears were bleeding, terrible headaches. After this model with the Schumann resonance embedded in that was provided to him, he is back to his normal business activities, and he even says, you see, I feel even better when I talk on the phone with this sticker applied. Thank you.
So we have time for several questions.
Thank you. I really appreciate your talk. I am not quite as sensitive as some of the people with cell phones, but I have not owned a cell phone for 12 years because if I am in physical contact with one, I tend to get a headache, and I also get muscle spasms up my arms. In one case, I didn't realize a cell phone was about half a foot away from me, and I was in a car, and my right arm stopped working while I was driving, and this kind of freaked me out. I'm kind of a two-hand driver. And so this was kind of a little bit of a blind experiment because I did not realize there was a cell phone within inches of my right hand. And so this went on for about half an hour of pain before I finally started looking around the car like, what's going on? And then I noticed the phone and I grabbed it and I literally chucked it to the back of the car because it was a hazard to the safety of me driving. So I'm very much touched by this. I'm wondering if you have any experience with safe sleeves, which I have a friend who is using one, and I'm able to hold their phone and have a short phone call without developing any symptoms while the sleeve is on it. It supposedly blocks the EMF coming off of it, and I'm wondering how that compares with what your sticker's doing, and if you know anything about that.
We're trying to check any new devices coming into the market, and as many as we can. And about 80–90% of them bogus. They don't work.
Interesting. Well,
but some
I
of them,
testimonial
they do.
for the safe sleeve if anyone else here is sensitive.
Yeah.
So how do you compare the effects of your infusion of frequencies to other sorts of devices like the Q-Link, where they actually resonate at a particular frequency?
Say it again, please.
So your plastic laminate doesn't actually have, it doesn't have any electromagnetic resonances or anything. It somehow has the information of the frequencies. How do you compare that to a device that actually has a resonant circuit for Schumann resonances, like the Q-Link?
You see, so our main goal, because we're applied physicists, just to help people. So our ultimate testing tool is a person. So as just young lady told us, so whether it works or not. And also Yuri told us, we use psychics, people who are electromagnetically they are sensitive. It's on when we place any device on us, we're asking for their opinions. What do they see? Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of research to be done on. It's a very interesting area, and we're open for that. So if anyone would suggest us to use electromagnetic devices to detect these differences, we're open to collaborate.
It sounded like for some of the experiments you were reporting, such as the one with the chiropractor in Canada, you were using what I thought you described as entangled transformers to achieve that correlation at a distance. I was wondering if you could go into a bit more detail about how you entangle a pair of transformers with each other.
It's very simple, York. So I'm paired just one transformer Then I cut it into pieces and send one piece back to Canada.
I see there's a difference in how people are using cell phones these days. They're not necessarily holding it up against their head as much as they used to. A lot of people are holding it down in their lap and having a speaker activated. Have you attempted to do any study on the energetic impact on the human body from that position versus against the head?
No, we didn't do that particular experiment, but I can share my own experience. So when I placed first model about 20 years ago of the phone into this pocket, in a week I started feeling some pain here. I couldn't realize at that moment that it's because of the phone. But as soon as I removed it, so the pain diminished. The new generations of phone, if I place it into my pocket for several minutes, my heart starts aching. And so definitely it works from a distance. So you know that's a reverse square root law. The further you have it, you're more safe. So that's electromagnetic field. That's how it works.
Thank you, Igor.